The observation deck of the Cathara's Reach hummed with the low vibration of stellar engines, a sound that had become as familiar to Mira as her own heartbeat. She stood at the reinforced viewport, watching the violet swirls of the Andorian nebula drift past like cosmic smoke. Somewhere beyond that curtain of ionized gas lay the trading post where they'd resupply in 3 rotations. 3 rotations. She could last 3 rotations. Behind her, the communal hall began to fill with the evening shift. The Cathara, a species of furred bipeds with leonine features and eyes that reflected light like mirrors, moved with their characteristic grace, their young padding softly behind the adults. Mira had been living among them for 8 standard months now, ever since the mining accident on Epsilon 7 had left her stranded and the Cathara salvage crew had found her half dead in an escape pod. They had saved her life. They had given her shelter, work, and a place among their crew. But the galaxy had not been kind to the Cathara's Reach in recent months. Mirakin, called Velth, the ship's quartermaster, using the suffix they'd adopted for her. His translator rendered his growling language into something approximating standard. The evening distribution begins. She nodded and made her way to the communal tables. The crew assembled in their typical fashion, cubs and juveniles toward the front, adults forming a protective perimeter. Mira had learned their ways. The youngest ate first always. It was instinct for them, written into their evolutionary code the way humans instinctively protected children from danger. But tonight, something was different. Velth's ears lay flat against his skull as he addressed the assembly. The protein synthesizers failed during the last solar storm. Repairs will take 2 rotations. We have enough base nutrients, but... He paused, his tail swishing with agitation. Portions will be reduced by 30%. A murmur rippled through the adult Cathara. 30%. Mira did the calculations automatically. For the Cathara, with their higher metabolism and larger frames, that would be uncomfortable but manageable for a few days. For her, with her smaller size and lower caloric needs, it should be easier. Should be. The trays came out, distributed by the older cubs who'd been given the duty of service. Mira watched as each young Cathara received their reduced portion, cubes of processed nutrients that gleamed dully under the hall's amber lighting. The cubs, bless them, didn't complain. They understood scarcity in the way all children of spacefaring species eventually did. When Mira's turn came, the cub carrying the tray, a youngster named Presh whose spots hadn't fully darkened yet, paused. His large eyes met hers, then flicked to the empty space in the tray where her portion should have been. Quartermaster Velth said. Presh's voice was barely audible. He said the human portion would come from the adult allocation. After the cubs are served, Mira felt her stomach clench, but she forced a smile. That's fine, Presh, I understand. She did understand. In their culture, she wasn't a cub. Despite being smaller than even their juveniles, despite her lack of fur and claws, she was counted among the adults. And in times of scarcity, adults ate last. She returned to her seat at the table's end where she'd been placed months ago. Close enough to be included, far enough not to intrude. Around her, the cubs ate with focused intensity, their instincts driving them to consume what they had. The adults watched with that peculiar mixture of pride and hunger that parents of every species seem to share. Mira folded her hands in her lap and waited. Beside her, separated by one empty space, sat Dren. At 14 standard years, he was the eldest of the cubs, his mane just beginning to darken into adulthood. His frame had the gangly quality of adolescence, too large for childhood, too uncoordinated for maturity. He was classified as a cub for another 2 months, by Cathara reckoning. She felt his eyes on her before she saw him move. Without a word, without even a glance to see if anyone was watching, Dren pushed his tray toward her. Not all the way, that would have been too obvious, but halfway. Into the empty space between them, Mira's breath caught. Dren, no, but he wasn't looking at her. His eyes remained fixed on his food, or what remained of it. He'd already eaten half, she realized. He'd eaten half, then stopped. Movement to her left drew her attention. Kiva, a younger cub with bright amber eyes, had been watching. Without speaking, Kiva took 2 of her nutrient cubes and placed them on Dren's tray. Then she looked down at her own food and continued eating as if nothing had happened. Then Presh, the server cub, returned from the kitchen with a water pitcher. As he passed Dren's place, his small paw deposited a single cube onto the tray. He moved on without pause, filling water containers, his expression innocent. One by one, moving with the silent coordination of a pack, the other cubs contributed. A cube here, half a ration there. None of them spoke. None of them looked at Mira directly. They simply acted. Within minutes, the tray in the empty space between Mira and Dren held nearly a full portion. The cubs had divided the burden so that no single youngster went without, yet together they'd created something whole. Mira's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, knowing that tears would only confuse them. The Cathara wept differently, with scent rather than salt water. "Dren," she whispered. "You don't have to." "You fixed my translator last week," Dren said quietly, still not meeting her eyes. His voice had the roughness of approaching maturity. "When I couldn't talk to my mother during her shift, you stayed up past your sleep cycle. That's different. You showed Kiva how to calculate jump coordinates," Presh added from the water station, his young voice matter-of-fact. She was failing her navigation training. "You told me stories," Kiva said softly. "About Earth, about human cubs, children who explored their own world before they reached the stars. Those stories helped when I was scared of the dark between systems." Mira looked around the table. Every cub was carefully focused on their food, but their ears were all oriented toward her. Listening. Aware. "We are pack," Dren said simply. "Pack shares." The adult Cathara, Mira noticed, had observed the entire exchange. Velth's whiskers twitched in what she'd learned was their equivalent of a smile. Several of the mothers had their ears forward. Approval. In Cathara body language. They had watched their cubs reorganize pack hierarchy in real time, and they'd allowed it. Because for the Cathara, pack wasn't determined by species or size or dietary needs. Pack was determined by action, by care, by the quiet choice to share when resources were scarce and hunger was real. Mira reached forward and took the tray. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you," she managed. Then in the limited Cathara she'd learned, Naketh Vora. Pack heart. The highest compliment one could give. Dren's ears twitched. He still didn't look at her directly. That would have made it awkward, would have turned a simple act into something requiring acknowledgement and reciprocity. Instead, he simply resumed eating his own reduced portion. Around the table, the cubs did the same, and Mira ate, each bite tasting of more than processed nutrients. Each cube flavored with something humans had known since their own species learned to hunt in packs on an African savanna millions of years ago. The taste of being seen, of being valued, of belonging. 3 rotations until resupply, she thought. We'll make it 3 rotations. They were pack, and pack survived together, always.